What's good, everybody? I'm Rariroon, and welcome to another episode of my Dislike Esper review series. Let's not waste any time and get straight into things. Last time, we covered the first Esper you get upon starting the game, Bryn, and now let's move on to the second. Drew is the second character you get upon starting the game. As a butler to House Ramses and an ops chief to the Esper Union, Drew is assigned to help Bryn out in her quest to rescue C. As a unit, though, Drew performs far better than Bryn and actually has meaningful resonances and ascensions. But first, let's take a look at his base stats. Drew's base stats are pretty standard. The only notable thing that is different compared to Bryn is that he is a little bit slower. This is pretty common for a lot of fighter units though. Fighter units tend to be slower because you want to center around their attack and or crit damage crit rate. Looking at his max level stats, he's not gonna have that much less attack than Bryn, but he makes up for it in a little bit more defense. His stats are pretty standard for a 3-star, but he's just a little bit slower, so that's something to keep in mind. Taking a look at his skills will showcase that this butler is not somebody to mess with though. Drew's first skill, Piercing Strike, deals 100% attack damage to one enemy, and upon crit, Death Judgment's cooldown will be reduced by 1 turn. The max and Bilamon effect on this skill is that the damage is increased from 100 to 130%. His second skill, Shadow Shock, has a cooldown of 3 turns and deals 200% attack damage to one enemy. This also has a 70% chance to inflict defense down for 1 turn, and the max and Bilamon effect on this skill is that the trigger chance is up from 70 to 85, alongside the cooldown being reduced by 1 turn. Drew's final skill, Death's Judgment, is a 4-turn cooldown skill that deals 200% attack damage to one enemy. And if he kills that enemy, he will launch a follow-up attack on a random enemy. The follow-up attack's damage is 150% of his attack, and this can trigger up to 2 times per turn. The max and Bilamon effect on this skill is that the damage is upped from 200% to 260, alongside the cooldown being reduced by 1 turn. Moving on to Drew's Ascensions, his A1 and A2 gives him flat stat increases, while his A3 changes his S3 to now ignore defense. This is going to be huge for him because he's going to be dealing a lot of damage to a lot of enemies and one-shotting a lot of potential threats. A4 is just HP increase, but the A5 is interesting because it gives him a flat 10% in crit rate, which is pretty nice because a lot of Espers, especially in the 3-star category, don't really get access to crit rate this often, and A6 is an extra 20% to attack, which is pretty nice. Going on to his resonances though, his resonances aren't that crazy. I did kind of hype it up a little bit, but it is significantly better than Bryn because he has 2 resonances that actually do something and change something about him that Bryn doesn't. R1's like final damage on this S1, R3, 5 and 6 are just flat stat increases, but R2 gives him some extra sustain. He can heal upon killing enemies, and he heals for 20% of his max HP, which is really nice. R4 is kind of counterintuitive. He's a DPS unit. You don't really want to give him as much speed as possible, but the extra speed on an enemy death, it is something though. And last but not least, moving on to his Divinate. When Drew's speed is above the enemies, Piercing Strike's damage has an additional plus 6% added to it. And when you max out this Divinate, that plus 6 is upped to 15%, and he gets a basic stat increase to HP, defense, and attack of 20%. Before we get into potential builds and relics, I just want to make a statement going forward for the rest of the 3 stars that I'm going to be covering. I'm just going to be telling you 2 different combinations of relic sets for each 3-star. You shouldn't really be max investing into these guys. There's not really that much that you can do to min-max everything unless you want to. So I'm just going to be pushing you guys in the right direction rather than giving a full depth analysis. Once we get to the 5 stars and the 4 stars, we will get a lot more in depth with the builds, but for now, since we're covering 3 stars and beginner units, just run either one of these 2 builds that I'm going to give you. So for potential builds for Drew, War Fiery, Thunder Fiery. I personally use Thunder Fiery, and he's a great speed clearer for APEP. I've gotten this record on APEP, I believe it was like 20, maybe 19 turns, and he works well. He works great. He does wonders. However, for the story, you could literally just put on some War Fiery, maybe get like a level 50 set of War Fiery, and he will be more than enough to clear up to Purgatory. Thunder Fiery is the go-to set set, in my opinion, if you want to like truly invest in him. But overall, he's just a standard damage dealer. If you want to keep him around for something like APEP, then that's completely fine. He works pretty well into that mode. Overall, great unit, definitely worth investing into early game. And that about does it for Drew. Thank you guys so much for watching all the way to the end, and I apologize for this video coming out later than usual. I did want to do this video series on like a weekly basis, but sometimes I just don't have the motivation to record and edit these types of videos. But I'm going to be trying to break that habit. I really do want to keep this series going, and it's going to take a long while. And I truly appreciate each and every one of you who are sticking through with me on this adventure to the end. Stay tuned for the next video. I will try to get at least started on it next week. And next video, we will be covering the third Esper you get upon starting the game, Q. Be sure to look forward to that, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Later.